Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and this week's Parshat is Parshat Haberacha, which is the final Torah portion of the 5 books of Moses, the final Parsha of the Torah. And in this week's Parsha, it is the last moments of Moses' life, and that is sort of the focus of the Parsha, the last moments of Moses' life and his death. But the portion begins with Moses blessing each of the tribes. Moses goes through and gives each tribe and each individual tribe their own blessing, something specific that only they need. And after that, God tells Moses to go on to Mount Nebo and to look out and see the entire land of Canaan, now Israel. And Moses can see from that vantage point everything, the whole land that God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The entire sort of purpose of Moses' life has been to take the Jewish people out of slavery, out of Egypt, through the desert, and to bring them here to this point. And on the final day of Moses' life, he has had this sort of mission fulfilled. He is able to see this land that he's worked so hard to bring these people that he's dedicated his life to. And God reminds Moses in this moment, God says, "I've let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there." Because if you remember going back many weeks now, Moses was told because of one of his actions that he was not going to be allowed to enter the land of Israel, that he was still going to die while they were still in the desert. And God is fulfilling his word on that. So Moses can see it. He's so close, but he's not going to be able to enter the land of Israel. And after that, the next thing the Torah tells us is, "And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there, in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor." So Moses, the greatest leader, dies right then and there. And the Torah continues, "And the sons of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. And the days of weeping over the mourning of Moses came to an end." So the Jewish people, they mourned the loss of their leader for 30 days. And then the Torah says, "And Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the children of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses." So after the mourning ended, Joshua became the leader, and the children of Israel followed whatever Joshua had to say, because Moses had appointed him to be the leader, and he was the new leader. And then the Torah tells us, "And there was no other prophet who arose in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, as manifested by all the signs and wonders which the Lord had sent him to perform in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants, and to all his land, and all the strong hand and all the great awe which Moses performed before the eyes of all Israel." And that's how the Torah ends. Those are the final verses. So the Torah ends with the death of Moses, saying that there was no leader like Moses. No one ever arose who matched the greatness of Moses. And it's a really interesting way for the Torah to end. I was listening to a great video on Aleph Beta. I will leave the link in the description below, by Emmanuel Shalev, and he was talking about why is it that the Torah ends with Moses? Why does the Torah end with Moses? Why doesn't the Torah end with, and you should, follow in the commandments, and you should love God and stay truthful? Why does it end talking about there was no leader as great as Moses, and that the people mourned for him, and that a new leader came through, but it wasn't the same? Why does the Torah end with that? So if you want to find out what Emmanuel Shalev has to say about it, that'll be in the description below. It's very interesting. But my sort of take on it was that the Torah is ending with a loss. The Torah is ending with grief, which is one of the most difficult things that we will encounter as people. The loss of a loved one, the loss of family, the loss of a leader, the loss of a friend, the loss of another person who is near and dear to us and who impacts our lives. And that is one of the hardest things that we will have to deal with in our own lives. It's one of the most painful things. And here in the final moments of the Torah, in the final lines, it's telling us about loss. It says that Moses died and there was never a prophet again like Moses. It's interesting because it goes, Moses dies, he was appointed, Joshua was appointed as a new leader, and there was no one ever as great as Moses. So it's interesting because we see first the succession with Joshua before they tell us that there was never a prophet again as great as Moses. So Why I found that to be interesting is because we see that someone can take your place, but nobody can replace you. In the sense of when there's a loss, let's take the example of a spouse. If your spouse, God forbid, dies and you remarry, it's not that you are replacing that person. Your spouse that you were married to could never be replaced. Nobody is ever going to be like them. But there can be somebody new who fills that same role, who is great and who brings you lots of happiness and joy and guidance and love. It's not, you cannot replace someone, but you can bring in somebody new into that same position. And we also see that the Jewish people, they took 30 days to mourn. They took that time to process their loss, and then they continued on in their lives. I think those are really powerful lessons because we can sit in a loss and we can become very depressed and we become very sad and we cannot know how to move forward. But the Torah is showing us the example of the Jewish people right here, that they mourned their loss, and it was a great loss. If you think about Moses, he had been kind of like a father figure to them. He had literally guided them for 40 years through incredible miracles and battles and struggles and immense things. He had been the one to turn to, receiving the Torah, guiding them, teaching them. He had been so much to them. And now, with his death, that was a huge loss for them. And there was never going to be somebody like him again. And so they took their sadness and they mourned Moses for 30 days and they wept. And then when it became time to continue on, Joshua became the leader and they accepted Joshua as the new leader. And even though he couldn't match the greatness of Moses and nobody could match the greatness of Moses, he was still their leader who took them and was a great leader. So the Torah is telling us not that it's ever going to be the same, not that somebody is going to be replaceable, but that we can still gain fulfillment and joy in our life from others, that we can find people to fill in those spaces and to fill in new spaces, but that people aren't replaceable and that they shouldn't be. So I think that is a really beautiful lesson that we can take away from this week's Parsha. Additionally, sort of in continuing with that idea, when we finish reading Vizot Haberacha, we don't really finish it. There are 7 aliyahs, 7 portions of this week's Parsha. Every Shabbat when we read a Parsha, or every holiday when we read a Parsha, there are 7 portions. And 6 portions come from Vizot Haberacha, but the 7th portion starts from Bereshit, which is the first Parsha in the Torah. So we are finishing something and beginning anew. And I think that relates closely to the Parsha as well, because we are coming to the conclusion of a story, but we are beginning a new story from the start. Something fresh is coming right as this one ends. So when a chapter, when a cycle, when a life comes to an end, there is still something that continues. Life still goes on, which is a really beautiful thing as well. So those are some lessons that I think we can take away from this week's Parsha. I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.